Okay, why don't we get started? We have some people starting to join in. I think we have a core group right now. Good evening. I'm Felice Farber. I am co-chair of the Community Board 8's Budget Committee. I'm joined by Billy Freeland, who is the other co-chair of the committee. So welcome, Billy. I know you have a tight schedule. This is the annual review and drafting of the city's, or excuse me, the community board's district needs statement. Many of you have been involved in this process much longer than I have been. But for those on who perhaps might be new, this is a review and statement of what the priorities are in capital and expense funding for the community board, or sure, I should say for the community. And we identify with as much specificity as possible where the priorities are and what we think the city should be spending its capital and expense resources on. We issued a survey to the community. We got a pretty good response rate. 277 people responded, and while that's a relatively small number of the total community, it's a better response than we got last year. And so we could just run through some of the responses. I put together a chart highlighting just by rank what the top 3 responses were. Will, if you want to just share that briefly, and I can talk to that. And I really want to thank the people who took the time to respond to the survey. What we asked, and was based upon the sections of the survey that are, maybe if you could make that a little larger. So it was the sections of the survey, excuse me, it was based on the categories in the district needs statement. And we asked people to rank their top priority and to provide an explanation. And so this here highlights really what people ranked as their first, second, and third responses. Interestingly, or I guess not surprisingly, crime and public safety were the #1 issue, with affordable housing not being far behind. And of crime and public safety, a lot of the comments about quality of life issues, homelessness, street conditions, also related to public safety and some of those concerns in the community. So we can, as we go through the district needs statement, we can talk through these a little bit more, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Billy, if you're on, do you want to say anything to get started?
No, I think we can go ahead. I think that covers it. Thank you, please.
Okay, great. Thanks, Billy. So I think there's some members of the public here, and would love to get, if anybody wants to speak, would love to get thoughts on what you see as the priorities in the community, if there's anything you would like to highlight, and then we can go through the city's district needs statement, excuse me, the community's district needs statement, and what the city's response was, and what we would like to prioritize moving forward. So if there's anyone who wants to speak first, otherwise we'll jump right into the details of the district needs statement. Okay, seeing no hands up. Oh, okay.
So we just remind you to use the reactions icon on your screen, to use the raise hand button. Even though it's a small room, we may miss you if you use your actual hands. So Robin, thank you. You should have an option on your screen to unmute. So whenever we call on you, just look for that prompt.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been living on 2nd Avenue and 69th Street for 34 years and in the city for 50. And Second Avenue itself, I feel, has become a like a dirty, lawless area. We have people breaking traffic rules. I go to police precinct meetings all the time, and there are all sorts of motor vehicles, not motorized vehicles, passing all red lights. This is brand new stuff. The whole area is so dirty. I loved the Upper East Side because it was a quiet, peaceful area. I just had lunch with a friend outside with more noise than any normal human being can tolerate. And I feel like Second Avenue is a parking lot. It never gets quiet, and it's dirty and it's different. And and things don't get done. I have a corner where the MTA was building the entranceway on 69th Street for the new subway. And there is not one city official that can touch the MTA enough to fix the corner of our building where it's all boarded up for 8-9 years. And everybody said, when I contact the council people, they say, go to the federal government. You have to talk to someone else. So our building looks terrible on 69th Street and 2nd Avenue because the MTA cannot be touched. So I feel like no matter if I go to police precinct meetings, a whole bunch of seniors stand up and complain about the same issues, but I don't see things getting done. I feel like it's it just doesn't feel good. Homeless people around here, and it's very difficult. I feel like I wish I could move, but who can afford to move anymore? So I had to vent. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments. Can you just provide more specifics on the 69th and 2nd Avenue, which corner, or if you want to send that to?
At the 69th and 2nd was where the MTA was building the entranceway for the Q train. And they took ownership of our first floor for about 1/3 of the block. And up till a few years ago, it was covered with a tarp that showed the route that the new subway was going to take. It took us screaming at 100 people to finally get the tarp down. And what they put up what they did instead was take blue paint, and painted the whole first floor of our building blue. And it's all wood, and we get graffiti on there all the time. And the rental agent next to it, MacArthur, has a whole bunch of storefronts that look terrible. They're not cared for. Nobody cares. It just looks horrible. The whole area looks terrible. And I wish somebody would go take a look. Just take a look. I feel like our city officials need to walk around, and scaffolding everywhere between 67th Street and 63rd Street that's been up there for years. I don't get it. Nothing gets done. It feels the same for years.
Thank you for your comments, Robin. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment first? Okay, so why don't we jump right into the district needs statement? And I will say that relating to crime and public safety, there's a feeling that crime has gone up. The comments about homelessness also relate in the survey related to feelings of both a combination of compassion and wanting services for homeless people, along with concerns about safety and cleanliness in the streets, and not having and people using the public streets as a bathroom. That was part of quality of life issues as well, both the impact of people as well as an apparent increase in people not picking up after their dogs, which I guess feeds into an advertising campaign that Councilmember Menon's office was engaged in. So Will, why don't we jump right into the district needs statement?
Which would you like me to be showing? This is last year's district needs statement.
Or what, the one with the city's response, so we could kind of go back through that response.
Here we go. And I'll make this bigger for everybody, because I know it's a little hard to see. So, and I'm going to put a few things in the chat for people if they want to look through these at their own leisure as we talk about them.
Okay, and if we could talk about them, and we can talk about setting the priorities. So we asked putting in priorities. So in the past, we've always asked for additional school seats in the community. And I looked through the school construction authority's capital needs and assessment of the number of school seats. And they report no need for additional school seats in the district, and project a decline in the number of students in the schools over the next 10 years. The one area that has been increasing are the number of students in pre-K. One of the issues that we highlighted here was the need for a newer expanding high school. And that has to do with how the city allocates high school seats, and high school seats based on a lottery, and a number of people, a number of students in this district not being able to attend high school in this district. So that was the issue there. As we can see, the city's response was that there's no identified seat need, and having looked at the SCA's reports, they have no identified seat need in this district, but there is a seat need because the students in this district are not able to get a seat in the local high school. I believe in the past we've also talked about the need for additional pre-K seats, and I saw an article that said the city had constructed some additional pre-K seats in this neighborhood, or 3K seats. So Boaz, I know this it's an issue that you have raised before. Is there any data or any kind of information we can point to if this is still an issue on the need for additional seats?
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. You know, it's every year it's the same. We are running the same. We are getting the same message from the education. So first thing, I never understand why this committee is not like a full board, because I think it's important that all the members of community board will be. I think this is the most important meeting, because this is where we are talking about the money, right? I mean, all the rest of the community meetings are all about resolutions and paperwork. And this is the money. I don't have anything smart to say. I know that the problem with the 3K and the pre-K is that some parents are getting seats outside of the neighborhood. You know, they need to go to, I don't know, downtown, to Harlem and so on. That's the problem. We just need more 3K, pre-K here in Upper East Side, specifically where many of the parents, you know, including us, we don't have car, right? We are basically using the public transportation. So yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
No problem.
Okay, the next issue that was prioritized was renovate or upgrade public housing developments. We talked about need for repairs to Isaacs and Holmes Towers, and the city said further investigation is required, which I think is a common statement. Unfortunately, Judy, you have your hand up. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I wanted to, sorry, I couldn't do it quick enough. On the pre-K, we have a new school on 65th Street. I don't know if it's opening for this September, but I'll try and find out that tomorrow and get back to you on it. The other thing I wanted to say is we also, with the Bentley Hotel and the immigrant families, we now are having more students of all ages in our schools. Which, wasn't planned on before. It's not as if they can count the number of families who live in apartment buildings, housing, whatever. These people just came into the neighborhood, and now these families are going to be going to our schools. So
Um,
that's something that we should take into account is the immigrants.
that is a great point. And it will have a huge impact on the schools, especially on the need for bilingual teachers. And perhaps additional services needed. Judy, do you have a sense of how many people are staying in the Bentley Hotel?
Well, there are over 100 families. I don't know how many children, but it's time for me to make a call, so I'm writing that down. And I'll get back to you. You could include it with your minutes if I can find out how many children and what age groups they're in.
Okay, do you know if that's the only facility in the neighborhood housing?
Well, that's the only one that I know about in the East 60s.
It's the only one in our district.
It
Okay.
is.
It's the only
I
one.
do know that we have an empty hotel on 64th Street that's been empty for many years. So I'm very surprised that they haven't latched on to that one. It's a rather large hotel. So we may be getting another one.
Okay, thanks, Judy. That's a good point. Renovate public housing development. I know there continue to be issues with getting some upgrades at Holmes and Isaac Towers. We could provide some more specifics on the need for renovations in the buildings. I think NYCHA itself reports the number of open work orders and any increases in those work orders. Some issues as well have been raised about parks capacity near Holmes and Isaacs and the hockey rink by I guess on the south side of 96th Street, right on the edge of our district, has gotten funding for renovations for the hockey rink, and they get funding by the New York Rangers, but the rest of that park has not gotten any increase in funding. And so there's definitely a request for additional outdoor resources for the kids in the community from the public housing up there. Judy?
I believe the other part of the park, the other area, Steve Simon had said that there was more funding. I'll also check on that, but he didn't say when or what was happening. So I'm making a list of these items and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, I was just writing that down. Okay, fund resiliency investments to protect Community District 8 against future storms. We have, for a lot of this, they're looking for specifics. On the community board, excuse me, on the city planning website, there's a very small portion of the community that is subject to, that is in a floodplain zone, right along the edge. A lot of the district is not in a floodplain zone. Are there specific requests that we might have for this? Other than a general statement about resiliency? Okay, moving on. Renovate or upgrade existing precinct houses. We've made an issue for the past couple of years on the need for improvements to the 19th precinct house, especially to their, specifically to their air conditioning system. With it being especially hot, record heat this year, and especially high humidity, that's even more of a priority. What we've gotten the response yet again is further study is required. Judy, this is right up your alley. Do you have additional info?
Precinct. They have about 240 people working at the precinct. I spoke with the inspector, and he was telling me they now have a temporary vehicle outside the precinct. I don't know what you call it, that provides them with air conditioning. Prior to getting that vehicle, officers, people they had in holding cells, people were passing out. It was so hot in there. So there is no question that the air conditioning system needs to be fixed. This was put in when Hunter College fixed their system, and they are the system that's supposed to be working is part of Hunter College, and it does not work. And they are in desperate need of a permanent repair. So I don't understand the city is studying this. There's no question about what's going on there. It's really a very bad situation.
Okay, thanks, Judy. Okay, next is provide funding to complete the full structural repair of the East River Esplanade between 59th and 96th Streets. Further study is required. I think again, right up your alley, Judy. Certainly there's need for additional funding, and there are sinkholes along the Esplanade that they need to fix. That is still underway and still a need. Judy?
Phase 3, specifically of Andrew Haswell Green, because they're talking about that being a $50 million project. So I think we should include that in there as well.
Okay. They said we asked for resurface the Roosevelt Island Bridge to improve bike safety. That apparently has been done, so we can take that off our district needs request. We asked for item number 7, to work closely with HPD to fund much needed housing for the most vulnerable, including a safe haven on 91st Street, which was something the community board approved. And then I think the scope of that changed. So DHS said they're responsible for providing temporary shelter and services, but not developing more permanent housing. Certainly with the need for affordable housing, that's a critical issue. Does anyone have any comments on this and whether we think this is a priority or not? I mean, certainly providing some kind of services. I think we liked the concept of a safe haven because it wasn't just a homeless housing, but rather providing the full complement of services, mental health services, placement services, other things to help people. Boaz?
My take on this is that, this is the most expensive neighborhood in, I don't know, in the world. I mean, Upper East Side. I don't think it makes sense to put the shelters over here just because the land is so expensive. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we need more apartments in general. I mean, we need more market rate apartment in general here in Upper East Side, in Upper West Side. but creating shelters and public housing here in the most expensive neighborhood in New York, I don't know how much it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Create or new or renovated and upgraded public library. We wanted a ramp for improved accessibility at the Yorkville Library. They said it's in current front end planning with DDC, so we'll continue to support that. Judy?
Well, I don't know if this is the place, but while we're on libraries, the 67th Street Library, the lift that goes up from the main floor to the second floor doesn't work. It's broken more than it's work. Oh, well, I see. That's the next item. It's broken more than it works. We really need a new lift. They've tried fixing it. I think at this point it just needs to be replaced.
And hasn't that library been renovated recently?
Well, it's been renovated several times over the years. And at one point that was a new lift, but it's not doing its job. I was there maybe 3 weeks ago with a handicapped woman, and we had to take the lift. It was that day working, but I've been there other days when it's not working. And I've spoken with Maggie Barber, the librarian. I think she's here. And she said, yes, there are times that it is definitely out of order.
Okay. I don't see Maggie on the list of attendees.
She was here earlier.
She was, but she has left.
Ah, okay.
I didn't realize, or I would have given her an opportunity to speak first. Okay. Let's see, libraries. We requested more affordable housing for all income. That has been a top priority for years for this community, especially as tenements are being torn down and new buildings are going up. We are losing some of the more affordable units in this neighborhood and being replaced by much more expensive units. I'm assuming this is still a priority. And Will, do you know if can you text Maggie, see if she'll be back if she wants to present on any of the library's needs?
I can send her an email.
Okay. Okay, moving on.
Elizabeth Ashby has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you very much for what you just said, because I think, you know, that we on the Zoning and Development Committee have been working for years, and we are continuing to press for this, because I think spending money on new affordable housing is great. But if you don't stop losing it, you have to spend more and more and more. And so I hope that money, this isn't capital, but that as we go forward, we'll bear this in mind and have money available to press this forward and preserve our affordable housing. First, second, third New York used to be affordable. The doorman used to live there. So I think that this protecting our affordable housing is extremely important. Thanks an awful lot. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, thank you for your comments. Okay. On the city planning's website, it has an index of communities and how they're rent burdened, and close to a third or a little bit more than a third of the people who live in this district are rated as rent burdened by the Department of City Planning. Okay, moving on. Traffic calming. One of the things that had been a priority for and a resolution from the Transportation Committee were to install bike lanes every 10 blocks between 60th and 110th streets. The city said that they're reviewing it. That nothing much happens when they say they're reviewing it, although I think they've said before that that still is a priority in looking at that. Any comments or suggestions? Okay. I think for John Jay Park, provide funding to redesign and renovate John Jay Park as a whole. I mean, they're not doing a whole park redesign, but but Parks Department does have a lot of work planned for the park. They're redoing the pool, a lot of the landscaping, the pavement. So Judy, would this be appropriate to then go into continuing support?
I don't know. There's other work to be done there. So I don't know. That's up to you, how you feel. Yes, they are doing work, but there's still more work to be done. And I think I'd leave it there.
Okay, then maybe we could just be specific about additional things that we think they should tackle. Because otherwise they're going to come back and they're going to say they're already funding it.
Yeah, I want to go back and look at my notes about what I have for Steve and John Jay. Can I give that to you tomorrow?
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. New sanitation trucks. Rat-proof garbage containers. Certainly, if we could see more of those big belly containers in the neighborhood. It does not seem uncommon for garbage pails to be overflowing. I personally have an issue with takeout food places that have the city's garbage container on the corner as their garbage that is frequently overflowing, and not much seems to be done about that. Overflowing garbage just encourages rats and provides food for them, and it is incredibly frustrating to see within the city. And I think people's perception of an overflowing garbage can is you can try to balance your piece of garbage on top of that, because you've still kind of gotten it close to the garbage. So that seems like it's still a priority, even though they said funding is uncertain. I know they've added a bunch of the big belly garbage cans around for composting. There's not great information out about the city's composting program, or where those garbage disposals are located. And from what I understand from someone else on the community board, when they have tried to use it, the composting bins have been completely full. So I think that's a real issue as well. One, it's great that people are using it, but the question is, to what extent and how frequently are they being emptied? So that seems like having the additional garbage cans is still a priority. Moving on, other street trees and forestry services. We want tree guards. When new trees go in, the city said bring it to your elected official. We can do that. Judy, this also came up at a parks meeting. Wasn't there an issue about who pays for it, and whether a community or a business can just install a tree guard?
Yes, anyone can install a tree guard in front of their property. They go to parks and get their permits and do what they have to. But frankly, I've started walking around the community more, and at least in the East 60s, there are more and more empty tree beds or tree beds with dead trees or stumps in them. I'd much rather see the money go towards replacing the trees, which has become very expensive these days. Rather than putting in but that's my personal opinion, rather than putting in an enclosure around it. The building who owns it, they can pay for the enclosure is my attitude. But that's just a personal opinion. I don't know if anyone agrees with that or not.
Well, and maybe part of the issue as well is when the Parks Department puts in a new tree, for example, in their park, to put the guard around it. I know that's been an issue.
Yes. Well, but they don't have the money to do it. So that's why they're telling you to ask the elected officials to do it. Now, I just got a call from the Parks Department, and our elected official for our local park has spent money on the parks for activities for children in the park and for planting and so on, having nothing to do with trees or tree guards or whatever. So I think the money that she's spending in the park is very important for the community. So if they want the elected official to pay for everything, it's just not going to happen because their budgets aren't that big.
Okay, well, that's a good
And
point.
of course, the city parks budget, as we know, is not that big either.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I think especially with the increased temperatures, the need for additional tree canopies is incredibly important. And that was something that the Manhattan Borough President put out a report on the need to address some of the heat islands in the city and the need for additional canopy coverage. Fund the return of the Queensboro Oval. I thought we took that out last year.
Well, my bookcases all fell down, so I was cleaning out all my stuff today, and guess what I found? Papers that I kept that I'll send you from 2015 on the Queensboro Oval. They can have up to a 15-year contract for that tennis bubble before they have to take it down. So I think we're fighting a losing battle. We might, however, get after Parks and ask them to clean it because it was really dirty.
Whose responsibility is it to clean it? Parks or?
No, it's part of their contract, the people who have the tennis bubble.
Okay, and one of the things that was in the community's comments to our request for information related to the area underneath the Queensboro Bridge right over there, and that it has gotten very dirty and a need to address some cleanliness over there. So that could relate to cleaning the Queensboro Oval.
Yeah, well, that's really, I think, a sanitation issue. I've been trying to get the sanitation person on the phone to talk to him about that. There are days when it's very clean. There are days when you walk there and there's a lot of litter on the sidewalk.
Okay. All right, thanks. Moving on. Fund phase 3 of Andrew Haswell Green Park, I think is still a critical priority. Fund the reconstruction of 24 Sycamore Park. Was there funding?
Yes, that's one of the projects that they're having community input on. Steve didn't know what month we would be doing it. Obviously not in September. So we'll have to wait and see if that'll happen in October. They have gotten funding for the lower level.
Okay, but it sounds like something that we should continue to push for.
Absolutely.
Okay. fund Samuel Seabury Playground. That was something that Steve had suggested needed additional work. But again, they pushed that off to a Senator elected official.
Well, maybe we can ask Alex about that. I think that's his district.
Okay. Okay. Catch basin on the northwest corner of 72nd Street. I guess the question, I know this was a big issue for Valerie. I guess it's a question of whether this is still backing up, or I think there was not a catch basin installed there and there's flooding happening. Does anyone have additional information on that? Okay, we'll follow up and try to get more info. Okay, moving on. Okay, we asked for a full exterior rehabilitation of the windows and replace where needed at the 92nd Street Library branch. I believe that was something that the public library had said was needed. So maybe we can follow up with them and see whether this is something that is needed. Fund a fully built park along the East River between 60th and 63rd Streets, including Phase 2B of Andrew Haswell Green. Andrew
That would definitely move to continuing support because that's been fully funded and it's supposed to open in December of this year.
It is under continuing support.
Yeah,
already.
and the one.
Oh, I'm
right
sorry.
before it is
I lost you. Yeah.
If
That's
you look on the
supposed-
left-hand side, you see a priority. It says CS, continuing support.
I had that part closed off, Will. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I think all the next ones are continuing support. So these were all capital requests. Is there anything in particular? I think one of the things that I think is important to really put back up in the priorities is Rupert Park. We took it out because it was supposedly, the funding was there, but it's been several years since they've said they had the funding to move forward with this park and move forward with the comfort station, and nothing's appears to be happening, or it's happening at a glacial pace. So maybe we need to really be emphasizing the need to move forward with this project if it actually is fully funded.
And I would mention, they don't call it a comfort station anymore. It's a restroom. I would specifically mention the restrooms because that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. They tell us it is, but they can't give us any information. So I would definitely put the restrooms in there.
Okay. Good point. And Boaz?
Regarding Rupert Park, what is the ETA? When is the park is going to be ready?
That is exactly the issue. I suppose.
No, I mean this is insane. I mean, I remember that we had the final vote about it like in 3 years ago, right?
Yeah,
Something like that.
Ben Kalos was the council member who had got a significant chunk of the money, got the design approved.
The question is, the money is still there? Maybe someone took it.
It just makes you wonder if they were supposedly finished the design and in the process and going out to bid. It's been an awfully long time, even for the city's process.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So we're getting a bit of a runaround because we've been getting the same statement from the Parks Department about they're just in the final approval process. So that final approval process seems to be taking a while.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now I guess we're getting to the expense priorities. Okay, so we talk about the need for additional 3K and pre-K seats, and they've asked for more information before making a funding decision. Part of the problem is we don't have great data on what the demand is versus how many seats are available. I think it gets back into the point that Boaz has raised about people in this community being forced to go far and wide to get those pre-K seats. Public housing, maintenance and cleanliness, further study by the agency of this request is needed. I think we can refer back to some of the stats that NYCHA puts out about the increase in work orders and the need to address fixing those work orders. Some will be capital, some will be expense, I suppose. Will, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, what were my thoughts on what?
Housing maintenance and the NYCHA request, the increase in work orders. I don't think all the work order stuff would be capital. I'm sure some of it is expense.
No, I think a lot of it probably falls into expense as far as like, yeah.
Right. Do something about rats, pick up the garbage, clean up the facility.
Yeah, I was just focused. The reason why I struggled for a second is that all of these answers are just so unsatisfactory, and it feels even worse than previous years. Just saying further study is needed, and kicking us to elected officials. I know the mayor just did a town hall in the Upper West Side. If he does a town hall on the Upper East Side, I think we should ask him why his agencies can't respond to a community board with an actual answer.
That is a great point.
Sorry, that's why I was distracted. I was just sitting over here being grumpy.
You know, and I'm sure if Rebecca Dangor was in this meeting as well, she would be saying, they say that every year, further study is needed. Well, you know, okay, when are you going to be done with your study? Okay.
You have a hand up from Sahar.
Oh, go ahead, Sar.
Hi, yeah, so just related to this, is there a possibility of asking them with like, you know, giving them a deadline for like this whole further study, as Will just mentioned, like saying, hey, come back to us with your further study in 3 months. Like, you know, for example, the Rupert Park example that we've been sitting on for so long. So can we just say, hey, like, you know, 2 months down the road, maybe you come back to us and speak?
So that isn't this section of, so there's a budget cycle where we do a bunch of different things at different times of the year. Essentially, we submit our district needs statement, and then the agencies have a period of time to respond to it. And that gets rolled into a January-ish report where we get the first set of responses to our district needs statement and budget priorities. And at that point, we write a letter to the mayor saying, you know, we are appreciative that you're funding this. We're disappointed you're not funding that, you know, and so that is technically the time where we write maybe a much stronger worded letter next year that says, you know, this is unsatisfactory the way you're responding to our
so it's usually 5 months before the answer. That's the protocol.
So
So
technically speaking, right now there's the city budget cycle. The fiscal year ends June 30th. So the city council must vote on a budget for that fiscal year, you know, for the upcoming fiscal year in June, and the mayor has to sign it. So immediately sort of after that, we sort of kick off our process of thinking about this FY25, which is not this current fiscal year, but next fiscal year. That's what we're talking about. And so essentially the agencies in October have to start theorizing what they're going to spend in next fiscal year too. So they do the same process too, just on an internal level. And so they will do a report essentially to OMB that is not public, it is not given out to anybody around October. And then that sort of coincides with the timing that we actually have to put out in our district needs statement. Then the first public document that the OMB will release every year is the mayor's fiscal plan for the next fiscal year, and that's usually released in January. And that's when we would write. We get this response, this document essentially that we're looking at. We get that in January. They do revise it later and then send us a better copy that incorporates things that we wrote into our letter. Which I think in that takes place in January. And then that kicks off the city council holding budget hearings and budget negotiations all throughout the spring, ending in the June vote for a new budget. So that's sort of like giving you the life cycle of the city budget.
So it's a year ahead that they're doing, kind of planning for the next year. And
Yeah,
it's
we are.
July to June fiscal.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we'll be learning now, like for instance, Rupert Park, we'll be learning a year ahead, like further away, right? What exactly like they're bound to do, like kind of what's coming in their budget, like 2025.
Yeah.
June.
So the reason why we have continuing support, right, is because these projects sometimes are so far out and that they're fully funded, but we want to make sure that, you know, we show that we still care about that project and want it to stay on the, you know, agency's radar or whatever. Yeah, but you are talking about this is a budget that would start July next year.
24, 25. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay. Youth workforce development requests. I think this was I think we all support summer youth employment programs. So I think that's a critical issue that I'm assuming we all still support. And that was a priority for this mayor. Pest control, that may be something that we want to move up in priority. That seems to be a significant issue throughout this neighborhood, the increase in the rat population, especially with some of the outdoor dining. As much as I do love to dine outdoors, it seems like for some of these places, it just kind of increases the food opportunities for pests. Here we specifically, as Willis pointed out.
Yeah, I don't remember why we would have done this. Like, why would we have done an individual location?
Maybe that was a specific issue last year, but definitely, you know, I think especially with all the construction going on in this neighborhood, the construction really just, you know, unleashes kind of all these rat burrows, and that brings them out even more. I think it's a neighborhood-wide issue.
Yeah, I would say when we go and we submit next year's, we just take that out, the location.
Yeah. Increased recycling program, including solid waste, enhanced funding for composting. I think we've seen that the city has expanded composting. What we need to make sure is that there's frequent pickup of those bins so that people who want to compost actually can. And funding for youth services at Isaac Center. I think the big issue has been that residents of those NYCHA facilities are not given priority for spots in the after-school programs, and I think they want to make sure that there's spots set aside specifically for those residents, and I think that's certainly a fair request and something that we really should continue to support. Okay, park maintenance and safety requests, I think are, continue to be a big issue, both in terms of security in the parks as well as maintenance of the parks. We need increased PEP workers. The mayor had made a promise of spending 1% of the budget on parks, and that budget has not been met. Something that the group New Yorkers for Parks have certainly advocated for loud and clear. And I think there's a significant need for more parks workers to maintain and support our existing facilities. Judy?
Yes, particularly pruners, high tree pruners. We don't have enough of those around. I know we're always submitting requests for high tree pruning. We're only allowed to prune on the street. They have to come with trucks, and they don't have enough people to do that. It goes along with everything else. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay. Enhanced home care services. Again, this is a yet another further study by the agency. One of the interesting comments from the community in the survey, and Will, maybe we can post it to our website. I put a filter on it, so if people want to filter, I can send it back to you with a filter. If people want to be able to filter by topic, maybe we could take out people's names and addresses and post it without the personal identifying information, just so other people can see how folks responded. So the enhanced home care services, some of the responses to the need for additional senior services was about the need for really a multi-pronged approach, more information about available resources, opportunities for the food insecure, trying to address that, community needs, loneliness, housing. I mean, there was a range of issues for seniors, but I think it was something to consider.
I can make this publicly available, just not where it's editable. If you would like, we can do that between this meeting and then our next meeting where you're going to vote on everything.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. And I think just adding a filter to it so people can sort to see, all the comments based on a specific topic.
Okay, let's talk about that offline of like what we want that to look like, and we can figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that got to I'm not sure the answer is enhanced home care services, but perhaps it is making more information available about what services are available. Boaz?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just a general suggestion. I think that I suggested that last year and previous year, because we are getting, community board gets the same answers every time from the city. We need further study and so on. Maybe instead of spreading out for so many issues, you put the list on the site, and then let's choose only 3 items, and let's focus on those 3 items only. Maybe it will help us, get the focus of, I don't know, when the mayor will come to, like you're saying, to Upper East Side, and we can tell him, listen, we asked for 3 things, I don't know, air condition for the library, I don't know, elevator for this, very, very specific items. Just sleep on it.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you.
No problem.
And then, of course, fully funding the community boards. Was it a 10% increase for all community boards? What was that? What was the number that we requested? Or just to increase funding in general?
We just asked for an increased funding. I used to give everybody the information that for, I think it was $2 million total, the every community board office would receive, that's meaning for 2 million, you divide that by 59 community boards, you would hire a new additional entry-level employee for each community board. Like, we're talking about pocket change for the overall city budget,
Yeah,
to make a meaningful change.
a rounding error in the city's budget.
Yeah.
Okay, and then increased funding for emergency food assistance programs. I think that's critically needed. You know, maybe these are issues, the food assistance, you know, addressing rats, food assistance, funding for the community board should be moved up in terms of a priority.
I stand corrected. It's 2.36 million.
Okay, good to know.
That's actually a little bit below. I mean, anyways, 2.5 million is what you need to fundamentally change the capacity of a community, of all community boards citywide.
Okay, thank you. What else do we have on here?
Funding for food pantries.
Yeah, I think there seems to be, you know, especially as we'll start to see a drop off in COVID funding, I think there really is a real need for funding for food insecure in our community. New traffic or pedestrian signals. OMB, let's see, what does it say? Supports audible pedestrian signal installation. Will be considered for locations based on multiple criteria. Please supply a list of locations. I mean, that's the same thing they had last year. Gail?
You just have to unmute, Gil.
Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to definitely support the whole concept of providing whatever services we can, food pantries, et cetera, for food insecurity. Because what we've been finding with the Women and Families Committee, even though COVID is theoretically over, the problems still exist. And then you couple that with inflation and the fact that the cost of food has gone up so much in the past 2 or 3 years. So anything that we can do, and there are many more people who are food insecure than sometimes admit that they are. So I think that's very important, particularly with seniors. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's a good point. And from my perspective, it should be moved up in the priority list, and
I would agree.
certainly welcome other people's thoughts on that. You know, especially not only is food, the price of food going up, but this community has always been expensive. And so it's even more obscenely priced food options in this neighborhood.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, traffic signals, they asked for specifics. I think there was a resolution from the transportation committee that went into some of the more specifics on that. So I'll take a look and see what they've said about this, because I think they did go into more specifics on this issue, or kind of general criteria on where they should be. We continue to support expanded library hours, and I think libraries and the funding for libraries provide, you know, services for lots of different types of people in the community, and lots of programming that certainly helpful for seniors and others. Again, you know, lack of funding. This has been in our district need statement for at least several years that I'm aware of. Boaz?
If I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that not only they are not going to extend, they are talking about maybe decrease the library hours because there are lack of funding. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll try to find the article and share it in the chat.
Essentially, that was a negotiation point during the last fiscal year's budget, that the mayor wanted to slash the New York Public Library budget. And because the New York Public Library is sort of a city agency, but also isn't, they're allowed to advocate against the mayor cutting their budget. And so they went on a full-on offensive to tell everybody that it was being proposed. And it's one of those old, like Bloomberg did this, other mayors historically would always threaten to cut libraries and then walk that back so that they appeared, to not have to negotiate on other things. So
got it. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Judy.
I would move more money, more hours for libraries, because I think I read what Boaz read. I think I read that they're going to close one more day a week. I would push that up in our request, because parks and libraries are the two things people can do and not pay for in this city. And particularly we have people of lower income, and that's something they can use. And I think it's really important. I don't know how anyone else feels, but I would list it higher on the list.
Okay, that's a great point. Okay. Okay, provide funding for rodent exterminators in the park. I think that's a critical issue. They'll try to accommodate this. That's good. We can re-emphasize that on the issue. Increase funding for mental health and other services targeted to the homeless. I think that given that issues with homelessness in the community have been among the top issues that people identified, I think this is something that perhaps we might want to move up in the priority list as well. Okay, provide, expand or enhanced after-school programs for elementary school. Contingent upon available funding. I don't know enough about this issue to comment on if what we have is adequate. Enhance park safety for the additional PEP officers. I think that is critically important, and we can pull some of the information from New Yorkers for Parks. They had a bunch of stuff about the need for PEP officers, I believe.
just really quickly, should see this here. Public Library announced, this is from just previous, that they were grateful that there were no budget cuts this year.
Okay.
So that the proposed budget cuts for libraries have been fully reversed. So just put everybody's mind at ease.
Okay, thank you.
You're on
Let's see.
17.
Yeah, thanks. Provide additional funding for children's services, especially programs to prevent abuse and neglect. Are there specific programs in this district that we want to say should be supported? Does anyone know whether there are items there? Okay. Fund additional DOT inspectors for regular enforcement of the outdoor dining program. I think especially with new rules coming out at some point on the outdoor dining program, I think that's probably will continue to be an important issue. I guess sometime next year we should see a draft of the new rules from DOT. Increase funding for food vendor rules and regulations. I would for all of these about increased funding for the number of officers and stuff like that, I'd love to be able to point to any data about the numbers of officers that there are, or, you know, any kind of staffing needs that we can point to specific data would be helpful. I don't know if anyone has that. But if they do, I think it could make our argument stronger. We asked for additional funding for the truck traffic enforcement unit. I'm not sure what that was for, whether that was for idling or some other element. Do you recall, Will?
I do. It's the truck traffic enforcement unit is the unit that there's only like one unit that exists inside the NYPD that will focus on truck traffic on streets that they're not supposed to be going down. So we often get a lot of complaints about areas around the bridge, and we also get complaints about like 84th Street, where trucks still cross the Central Park, and then they'll just stay on 84th Street even though they're supposed to deviate and go back to the truck route. So that agency is not something we receive nearly as many complaints about as we used to. And I don't know if people just sort of gave up on it, or the pandemic changed it, or what, but it's something we used to receive a lot of complaints about, was illegal truck using the local streets instead of the truck routes.
And are we still getting a lot of complaints about that?
Like I said, no, but that may change. It's people may have just given up on it, or maybe we're doing a better job as a city getting what's the phrase, the last mile delivery, and moving that over to, I know we talked about this yesterday at the transportation committee, moving that over to e-bike deliveries and like smaller vehicle deliveries, Sprinter vans, stuff like that.
Okay, I guess as long as they stay out of the bike lane or obey traffic rules.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, increase the number of workers to inspect, repair DOT's infrastructure, bridges and roads. The city has a biennial inspection requirement. It's a federal rule. New York State does a pretty good job with it. They stay on top of it. I'm not sure that this is a specific issue that needs to be a priority. I defer to others if they think this is. They're required to do biennial inspections, and I think the city, after its history of its infrastructure falling apart, has done a pretty good job on this. But Judy?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you are.
I would leave that in. We have a piece of infrastructure that needs repairing on the FDR Drive that DOT is doing, that I speak to them on a regular basis and can't get a date for the work. This particular project is somewhere between 4 and 5 years old. So
I think they know the condition. The question is, what are they doing about it?
Well, I think they need to put more money there and more workers there. The particular condition I'm talking about, they need to hire an engineer. They don't have an engineer to design it. And I don't know if that's because they don't have the money to hire the engineer, or they can't find the engineer. But this project has just been sitting there because they don't have an engineer to design it.
Well, maybe that's something that moves
Approval to go ahead. So I'm not so sure that I'd get rid of this so quickly.
Well, maybe what makes sense is to move it to the capital section and talk about the need to accelerate repairs.
These repairs are definitely capital. They're not expense.
Right. And so just having bridge inspectors isn't going to fix the problem, but talking about the need to fix John Finley Walk, right. And the roof to the FDR Drive, I think is
right.
critical.
uh, it's the DOT needs the money to hire the people to do the work.
Yep. And I think I think those are capital dollars.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I would take it out of here and put it in capital. Do we have room to do that, or have we used up all our capital?
We don't actually have a strict number of spots anymore. We can just add more if we want to add more.
Oh, great. Okay.
Address legal conversions and use of buildings. I don't have any information on to what extent this is an issue. Is there anyone who has a better understanding of this issue?
I think this goes really far back, and probably Barry Schneider could tell us a history of it too. Of when the Zoning and Development Committee first started, one of the things that they were very big on was signage enforcement. And I don't know if Barry wants to chime in. I'm putting him on the spot, but I think that this has honestly just been in our budget priorities since Terry Slater and Barry, you're unmuted.
I know I'm unmuted. I'm waiting for you to finish your sentence.
Oh, this all predates me being on at CB8. So
Well, honestly, you raise a very, very ugly issue. When I was chair going back to 2000, the year 2000, I asked one of the members of the committee of the board, what would you like to do? And she said, I'd like to do a zoning and development committee. I said, well, we have a land use committee that does it all. She said, no, I would have handled it differently. I regret the day, not only do I regret, other members of the board remind me periodically of the fabulous mistake I made by dividing the role of land use into this pedestrian attitude toward, never mind, whatever they don't want, they can't have.
So regarding the illegal conversion and use of buildings, do you have some history and of what that is? And does that continue to be an issue?
I see it says illegal signage in this, and I know that was one of the things that the board was very active on before I was here.
Absolutely.
Is that still a thing? Is that no longer a thing? And maybe it just needs to be tailored into DOB inspectors, because there are DOB related problems that we need to have inspected, and we're using the wrong request tag, the illegal conversions and uses of buildings.
I'll pass on that. I'm sorry.
Judy, do you or Gail?
Well, I think that the zoning committee takes it up. For instance, when they put up that huge billboard on York Avenue, which turned out to be okay because of the zoning. But I think if we see any illegal signage, anybody in the community, it's brought to the zoning committee, and which is what I did. I took that billboard to the zoning committee and we discussed it. And I think that's what's happening. And then we go back to the DOB and say, is this legal? Isn't it legal? And if it's not legal, I mean, I think our zoning people are very good about doing that. And they will get we do have inspectors, and they will get the inspectors out. I don't know that it needs to be listed here. I think it's just something that our zoning committee will do because they've done it in the past.
Thanks, Judy. Gail?
I agree with Judy. I think that whenever we see a sign that might be out of proportion and not in keeping with the appropriate zoning, the Zoning and Development Committee does address that. But it's also important, I think, what Will said, just to keep DOB honest, because sometimes they really don't do their inspections as thoroughly as they should. And we've had instances where it's been the Zoning and Development Committee kind of sitting on them and going back and forth just to make sure that everything's in compliance for safety, but also just in keeping with the codes. So they're not always as responsive as they should be, unfortunately.
So
The signage, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a major problem. And Judy is correct that if we see something that's inappropriate and we know that it's out of context, then it'll be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're up to hire additional traffic agents, and
Oh,
school crossing guards. They said they'll try to accommodate this. I'm sure they've said they try to accommodate it for a while. I wonder, I mean, I think what we really need enforcement of are, you know, some of the illegal scooters, running the red light, things like that, in the community. I know that's been a big problem. I'm not sure what traffic agents could do about that. The police don't seem to be able to do much about it. Judy?
yeah, to me, I would reword this because not only do we need more traffic agents, and now I'm speaking about the bridge area and the FDR Drive entrances and exits from the bridge and the FDR. So the 60s is a total mess. We've spoken to the 19th about it, and the commander is trying to get more agents. But not only do we need more agents, somewhere in big, bold capital letters, we need to say the agents need to be better trained. I stand on the corner and they pay attention to the cars, and they don't care if the people get run over with the light or whatever when they cross. The agents are not well trained, and we've never put that in there. And I think we really need to make an issue of that. We've made an issue of it with the 19th precinct, that they need better training. Because to have them out on the street and not do their job properly, you might as well not have them. And we
Okay.
do more of them, certainly down here in the 60s.
Okay, thank you. Okay, number 25, provide funding for eviction prevention services for at-risk senior citizens. Do we know whether this is an issue? Is there something specific we want to refer to? Or is this something that's been in there for a while? Item number 25.
I mean, it's probably something that's been in there a while. It is something that has been important in our district in the past, because we did historically have a large number of rent stabilized and rent regulated apartments that were occupied by seniors, and there are unscrupulous landlords who try to evict people and use every method they can to get rent regulated tenants out of their buildings. I mean, that's.
Yeah, no, good point. I'm sure that's still an issue we should keep in there.
I guess the one question I would have is it DFTA funding, or is it does DFTA have a program for this, or is it actually coming from the new right to counsel legislation? And if there's anything that comes from a different agency, but I still think probably there are programs at DFTA that are designed for helping seniors stay in their houses.
So I don't know the answer to that, but I will take a look and see what I can find out. Further increased funding for more permanent housing for homeless families. I mean, I think the city's so overwhelmed with trying to find housing for the influx of migrants. They're a little overwhelmed right now. But they do say that funds have been allocated in the budget for these services, so that's a good thing. And then plant new street trees. I think that we talked a little bit about this. I think this is critical, especially the need to expand the tree canopy. Sahar?
Yeah, so for this one, I was just wondering, isn't the borough president also giving, like if you reach out, giving trees? It's like that whole, the million trees, like million more trees initiative. They're the ones that are dead. He's trying to put them. So is there somehow that can be linked in here too? I'm just learning about this. And can we mention something in there too about that? And that, would it just be Department of Parks and Recreation, or he's giving some, does that help in any way the budget?
So that would probably go, so there's two sections to our district needs statement. There's the district needs statement and the budget priorities list. This is the budget priorities list. There's the narrative sections of the district needs statement where we talk about things. The budget priorities, we just ask for things and usually try to make them as specific as possible. In the district needs statement, there's going to be a section that is all about, sorry, it's going to be a very quick jump, but, the narrative about parks and open space. And we go into, sorry, this is actually, I scrolled too far. We'll have a narrative that talks about parks and other stuff. And I think that's where we add that we have a resolution supporting the 1 million more trees, and you put that into our narrative about parks and parks, cultural and other community facilities.
Okay. I mean, I'm just wondering that, like, since we're asking for so many things, and just, kind of picking up on what Boaz said, that we should pick up a few priorities and like kind of zone in on those so that we do get something. So I was just thinking that since the borough president is giving that if we can get more trees through that and like kind of put all our forces for the others. So I was just wondering on that.
Yeah, and the 1 million more trees initiative is a lobbying the city to fund 1 million more trees. So the borough president doesn't have 1 million trees worth of money that he's giving away 1 million trees. He and his other borough presidents are asking the city to fund that many more trees. So they're basically saying the same thing we're doing.
Same thing. Okay, got it.
But we have put in a couple of different places things that relate to basically park maintenance and tree pruning, and I think we can consolidate that into perhaps a stronger description, tying it into the whole argument about 1 million more trees and the benefits of 1 million more trees. And so we need to plant more trees. We need to maintain the trees that we have. And so I think we can consolidate and strengthen that.
I would also be getting an evaluation. I don't know if I haven't read it yet anywhere, that how many of the current trees are dead, or as Judy was mentioning that there's so many that are vacant spots. So kind of having that as well, like even before we get to getting the trees, the evaluation of what do we really need in our district? How many do we need? And then asking for the trees through various modes, and as having it here.
If I can put Judy on the spot. Judy, the Parks Department used to do some sort of like tree census every.
The E60s does by December 31st a tree census of
The
dead.
Parks Department doesn't do that too.
Well, of dead and missing trees. A lot of the neighborhood associations in the past years, I don't know who's doing it now, from 59 to 96, have gone out and done the same thing we've done. Last year, our tree census showed that we had dead or missing trees of 130 or 40 trees. I don't remember the exact number that I submitted to the forestry department. Then I get a list of how many are being planted in the spring and how many in the fall. The 60s does not get, I don't think, the 60s, which is 10 full blocks from the river to Central Park, got maybe 40 trees for the year. To me, that's not a lot. And a lot of the trees that are taken out, like Con Ed and by the bridge ramp where people were building, when they take out a tree, they have to pay for like 5 or 6 trees in order to take out a tree. So that means that those extra trees are supposed to come back to our community. And it hasn't happened yet. I mean, I don't think they have enough money, enough people. Parks just can't do everything that they're supposed to do in my vision.
Judy, if I may ask, am I unmuted? Yeah. Just a question. So the trees the number that you mentioned, so these are trees on the street as well as inside parks, right? So it's like a total number that
not inside parks. Parks takes care of their parks. These are all street trees, that are missing.
That's a big number. Wow.
And we're just one section. So if you go up through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I mean, there are other associations. I don't know whether they're doing it and whether Parks does. I'd have to call Forestry and find out whether they do their own survey of the whole district. I really don't know the answer to that question, but I'll find out.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
There's an organization that's called the New York Restoration Project. They are partnering with the Parks Department. And this past April and May, they planted 3,500 new trees, but it was throughout the 5 boroughs. So when you start to break it down, there still are not that many trees. You've got organizations like the 86th Street, East 86th Street Association, which has done some of the plantings along 86th Street. So they've raised the funds for those trees. I know that Carnegie Hill Neighbors, I don't know if they do a census, but they certainly try to work with property owners to get replacement of trees. And I think that the problem with Con Ed is often they will do work on the street that impacts the sidewalk and the trees, but trees don't always die right away. So sometimes the roots have been impacted by the work, and the horticulturists will tell you that it takes 2 years to know whether or not a tree survives after Con Ed has basically hammerjacked the street and part of the sidewalk. And then it's almost impossible to go back to them and tell them they should be replacing the tree because they go, no, but tree's been there since we've done our work. So I think it's really hard to figure out who to get to be accountable to really donate more trees. And that's a major issue. But I agree that we should try to be creative and think out of the box and see what other community organizations are working to replace street trees.
I will say that if a tree has been put in, they have 2 years. If the tree dies within 2 years, the city requires that the planter replace the tree. So if Con Ed or whoever is doing work or disrupts the tree, whatever, if the tree doesn't survive within the 2-year period, then it must be replaced. And of course, part of that is reporting it to the forestry department so that they know that the tree has died.
Well, that's, once again, if we start to think in terms of helpful hints that we give to the community, because I don't think that most of us would necessarily know that there was that 2-year period after the work was done. And all you have to do is walk around the district to see how many streets are torn up and sidewalk flags have been jackhammered and trees have obviously been impacted. Hopefully, most of them will survive. We know we have 2 trees outside of our building that right now they're hanging on, but it's only been about 8 or 9 months since Con Ed did the work. So it'll be helpful for people to know because that I had not heard that there was that 2-year lead program, Judy. So that's helpful to know.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
I was just wondering, Gail, what you just mentioned about, I missed the name of the organization that you're saying is doing all of the work. Is there any sorry, what was the name, Gail? Could you repeat?
It is the New York Restoration Project.
The New York Restoration Project. And I was just wondering, is it like, you said that they are doing it all over in all the boroughs. I was thinking, is there any way of kind of, I mean, I know we're like asking the city for this, and that's why we're having this meeting, but is it possible to even request them that can you please concentrate on our community board area? And these are the number of trees that have been identified. I mean, like, we don't have the exact number, but if maybe we can do a task force amongst us, and we can physically, it's not a big area, we can physically see and count the trees and then reach out to them and ask them, can you please concentrate on our community board? And let's see what they say. I was just wondering, is that?
Yeah, I think we could make a phone call and find out how they determine which locations are selected for the trees. Because if it's all 5 boroughs, I would think politically, if they're in some type of partnership with the New York City Parks Department, that it would be hard to allocate trees to just one district. But if we're able to show how many trees we have that are dead that really need to be replaced, and we can kind of argue why we might need more trees than some other areas, that's also something that we could consider. I'm happy to give them a call and see if I can find out how they make their determination when they allocate the trees.
Yeah.
And then I'll let, actually, Felice, Judy, and yourself know.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gail.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
No problem.
Okay, moving on. Expand or enhance rental assistance vouchers. Did we talk about that? I guess we talked about that. Certainly affordable housing is an important issue. Create grants or low interest loans or other financial supports to assist small businesses adapting to and recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think we still need to do that. I think small businesses are still struggling in this community. You still see a number of vacant storefronts. So I think this is continues to be a critical issue. For the Board of Elections and Election Day support, provide funding for more voting locations, more maintenance staff, mechanics available to repair machines, and ensure machines are working. Okay. Sahar.
Yeah, thank you. Just one, sorry, I want to go back to the previous one about the low interest loans and stuff. I was just wondering, in small business, like, does that also include these street vendors? Because they have, their business is very small too. Do they get benefit from this too?
I don't think so, but I don't know. I mean, I know for the street vendors, it's more of an issue about getting their permit to operate and kind of the limitations on how many street vending permits there were. In terms of low interest loans, I'm not sure that they're available but I don't have enough information actually on this. My sense is that they're not available for the street.
I had the opposite sense. I felt like SBS does work with the street vending community too.
Because they should. Those are small businesses as well, and they're quite
they don't just.
Yeah.
They're small businesses, and so if they applied for any sort of small business program through the Department of Small Business Services, I'm sure that they would be considered just the same. They don't need a brick and mortar store.
It is definitely something that I will take a look into because I'm sure Will is correct. Okay. So in terms of setting kind of our priorities, it seems like obviously affordable housing is still at the top. I think school seats were still in there, and kind of parks and infrastructure funding. Are those kind of the top priorities? And then I think maybe we need to make sure that there's some funding for the food insecure in our neighborhood increased. I mean, I guess this I'm mixing capital and operating capital expense. But make sure there's sufficient police presence in our neighborhood and services for homeless people.
So just for anybody's edification, the SBS does work industry specific resources for restaurants, street vendors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they do work for street vendors. You know, this is just an announcement from earlier last month.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other additional issues or comments? Okay, thank you everybody for your time and your patience reviewing this. I'll write something up. We have another meeting before this gets voted on by the full board. But I think that meeting is the day before the next board meeting.
No, it's the 10th of October. It's the day before our next land use meeting. So that's probably what you're thinking. But
Okay.
it's the day after Columbus Day. So everybody rest up. I don't know.
So I will make some edits and some comments based on what we've done and have something more formal for everybody to review on that day. If on their specific sections of the district needs statement, if you have any comments or suggestions about changes that should be made, I look forward to hearing from everybody.